Rio Grande Games certainly seems to have established a pattern of publishing sci-fi themed Euro games. There's Beyond the Sun, Endless Race for the Galaxy, and now their most recent release under this category, Space Station Phoenix, by Gabriel J. Cohn, whose previous design was Exodus Fleet by Tasty Minstrel.
I don't think I played that one.
Neither have I.
But this one is a great little game, I think, for... I think there's a little bit of barrier to entry. There's a lot of front loading to this game. There are tons of tiles that are pretty well the base of the game. Like, you need to know about 9 to 18 tiles before you can even start, because you're sort of building towards something, right? So you sort of have to plan out what you're going to do. But Space Station Phoenix, you're getting aliens, you're sort of like... you show up in space with all these ships, and they say, hey... we would like a station now, and you look around for the metal that you're going to use, and you say, sorry, boys.
No metal, but I do have these ships. Wait, ships are made out of metal. And so you, in point of fact, tear away your ships to build your Space Station Phoenix. And the trick is, the ships are your action spaces. So as the course of the game goes on, your range of available actions narrows, but your space station gets better. And your space station has in it a whole bunch of bonuses that you can activate if they're properly staffed. Bonuses usually to income, but sometimes additional bonuses to various actions you're taking. For example, when you take a diplomacy action to move up some of the tracks, you might get a bonus exchange and therefore be able to get more staff or what have you. And this is kind of an inversion of the normal pattern of many Euro games where the options expand, where as you're building more buildings or building more resources, you have more places to go and more things to do. Space Station Phoenix is the opposite. You get a narrowing of focus, but the hope is that by the end of the game, your actions are that much more potent as a consequence.
Yeah, you can sacrifice your own side and use other people's action spaces instead, which is sort of what I did in the last game. It's like, well, I don't need these spaces. I'll just use somebody else. And they also have like a generic one that anyone can use, right?
Yes.
It's a lot more expensive, but you can sort of demolish your whole fleet and just work off of those once you've got sort of like a currency generator going. Then you can sort of pay the premium to do these other actions.
Of course, relying on your opponent's fleets is risky because they might tear it apart as well. And then suddenly that thing you were relying on doesn't exist for anybody. The trick is, for me at least, the first time I played Space Station Phoenix, as somebody who, as I said, is more accustomed to the other arc of Euros as options expand and as time goes on, you're able to do more and different things. I found it very refreshing to have something that was exactly the opposite. And so this efficiency puzzle, it's basically an efficiency puzzle. You're racing towards your own victory conditions or your own endgame conditions while scoring as many points as you can, or setting yourself up for endgame scoring, which is where most of your points are going to come. And the fact that it was so different in that way, I thought was novel. And that novelty completely evaporated on all my subsequent plays. The come down for me personally on Space Station Phoenix between play 1 and play 2 was massive. And I'm more or less sitting in my estimation of where I was at play 2, which is to say, sometimes the box exists for a reason. I applaud the designer for thinking outside the box. And that's great. And in so doing, he, to me at least, has demonstrated the virtue of the box. I think I'll be staying in the box from now on.
It's very much sort of like Tricarion is the game I was thinking of, where you really need to sort of, weave your path, your goal. You say, okay, well, I need these certain parts of the station, and this is how I'm going to generate my points at the end of the game. And if someone breaks that, then you're in a lot of trouble.
There's that. To my mind, the sort of comparison I'd like to draw is with another Rio Grande sci-fi game, Beyond the Sun. In a game of Beyond the Sun, the range of available actions explodes over the course of the game, not in an overwhelming way, but in an interesting way. Suddenly you're discovering a new technology that lets you do something in a more powerful and interesting way, and so you don't feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again. The game of Beyond the Sun doesn't get more interesting as it goes on. To my mind, it just keeps feeling repetitive, because the most interesting parts aren't the space station tiles that you're building. There's a whole bunch of space station tiles that you laboriously go through and read, but they give you very, very marginal effects in my experience. The really interesting part, I think, of the asymmetry and of the power and how things work are actually the cores of your station, which you get at the beginning of the game and you never get any more of. The ships are dull and repetitive. The space station tiles don't really add much to the variety, so at the end of the day, you're just cycling through the same limited set of relatively straightforward actions. Easy game to teach, by the way, for its weight. fabulously simple and straightforward. The puzzle of working out the resources efficiently is very, very difficult, but I just feel like it's grindingly repetitive.
It's true, and it does move at a great pace until you get to the dice game. There's an action you take where you start rolling dice, and sometimes you'll get an action that'll let you re-roll dice. So it's action, action, action. It's like, no, wait, I'm going to do the dice game, and then you have to wait for the person to roll the dice and decide which one they will take, and then it really just slows the game down.
And that, for my mind, is why I don't think it's quite as restrictive as some planning Euros like Tricarion, because you can go to the dice and get some degree of flexibility. Now, of course, the dice will impose their own restrictions. You know, you can desperately need one kind of resource and the dice just won't give it to you. And there are no default action spaces that will give you resources, because there's only a small number of those ships, and they might have been torn to pieces, they might not have been drafted, they might not have even appeared in the game, etc., etc. So ultimately, as I say, the inversion of the normal arc is an interesting experiment, but I don't know that it's a successful game at the end of the day because of how simply repetitive it is, and the narrowing of focus doesn't lead to an increase in intensity or an increase of interest, just a smaller set of things you'll be repeating.
True. Same with the aliens, right? They could have done something interesting where the different aliens that you take into your station would do different things, but it's just supply and demand. Like, you might run out of some, and I just have those. It would be nice if it had a lot more variation.
Staffing your station is a major part of your victory, but the problem is it's not particularly interesting. You acquire these aliens, and they show up somewhere, and they're going to be a substantial point at points. But when reading the rules, I was hoping that there was going to be more dynamism. It's like, oh, I need aliens over here. Oh, no, now I need to staff this other thing. Or now I need to staff this other thing. But in practice, you hardly ever need to move them.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was really weird that they had this, oh, you could use these actions to move around. It's like, why would you do that?
Right. So there's a lot of potential, I think, and some interesting ideas. But at the end of the day, for me, I would recommend, if you're somebody who plays a lot of Euros, especially of the mostly multiplayer solitaire resource manipulation type, I think that Space Station Phoenix is worth 1.5 plays. That's about it.
Agreed.